The rain drizzled softly against the glass walls of the penthouse, the lights of the city shimmering like broken diamonds below. He stood there, tall and immaculately dressed, a crystal glass of whiskey in his hand. The millionaire had spent years conquering markets, building empires, and bending people to his will, yet tonight his thoughts weren't on numbers or boardrooms. They were on her, his ex-wife, the woman who had once been his entire world, the only one who had ever dared to walk away from him. He had sent his driver to fetch her. The message had been blunt, commanding even, "Come. One last night, no arguments." He knew she hated his arrogance, but he also knew she wouldn't resist the pull of unfinished business. And when the elevator doors opened with a hushed chime, there she was. She stepped out slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her eyes scanning the opulence of a place she once called home. The years apart hadn't dulled her beauty. If anything, it had sharpened it. She looked different, stronger, somehow. She was dressed simply, in a flowing dress that contrasted with the extravagance around her, but her quiet grace struck him harder than any diamond necklace could. "You haven't changed a bit," he said, his tone cool but his gaze betraying hunger. Her lips curved into a faint smile, one that held no warmth. "And you still think you can summon people like they're your employees?" He smirked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You came, didn't you? That means some part of you still listens to me." Her eyes flickered, a storm gathering in them. "No, I came because I wanted closure. You said one night. After this, we're done. Forever." The word forever cut through him more than he expected. He took a long sip, buying himself a second to hide the twitch of pain in his jaw. "Closure," he repeated. "Funny. That's what I told myself too. One night. That's all I want. One last time to remind you, and myself, of what we once had." She crossed her arms, the city lights outlining her silhouette. "What we had doesn't exist anymore. You destroyed it." His eyes hardened, but beneath the steel was desperation. "Destroyed, maybe, but you can't deny it's still there, under the ashes. You feel it, I know you do." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. She turned away, walking toward the window, her reflection shimmering against the night sky. He watched her every move, the sway of her hair, the rise and fall of her breath. For years he had been surrounded by women who wanted his wealth, his name, his empire, but none of them had ever been her. None of them had haunted him the way she did. "You always thought love was possession," she said finally, her voice low. "As if I were another one of your trophies to display. That's why I left." His hand tightened around the glass, the whiskey sloshing. "I gave you everything. The world at your feet. What more could you possibly have wanted?" She turned, and for the first time that night, he saw the fire in her eyes. "I wanted you. Not your money, not your power. Just you. But you didn't know how to give yourself without control, without turning it into a transaction. That's why we ended." Her words struck deeper than any business rival's blow ever had. He stepped forward, closing the space between them, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Then give me tonight. No deals, no contracts, no fights. Just us. One last night. After that, you can walk away forever." She searched his face, as if trying to find the man she once loved buried beneath the hardened exterior. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. Instead, she let out a long breath, the kind that carried years of pain and longing. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she nodded. But in her eyes, he caught something he couldn't name. A shadow, a secret. It unsettled him, though he pushed it aside, convincing himself it was hesitation, nothing more. As he reached for her hand, the city lights flickered below like silent witnesses, and for the first time in years, the millionaire felt both victorious and vulnerable. He thought he had won her back, even if only for a night. He had no idea that by morning, everything he believed about her, and about himself, would shatter. The air inside the penthouse shifted as the night deepened, the storm outside now nothing more than a distant murmur. He had dimmed the lights until only the glow of scattered candles filled the space, their flickering flames casting soft shadows across the room. The atmosphere was carefully orchestrated, romantic, intimate, persuasive. He wanted her to remember what it once felt like to belong to him, to feel the heat of their shared past pressing between them. She sat on the leather sofa, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. It was a familiar place, yet it no longer felt like home. The walls that had once echoed with their laughter now seemed hollow. He watched her carefully, leaning against the bar with another glass of whiskey in his hand. He noticed how her gaze roamed, not with longing, but with quiet detachment, as though she were saying goodbye to every corner of the life she once lived here. "You used to love this view," he said, breaking the silence. "You would stand by that window for hours, saying the city felt alive, like it was breathing with us." Her lips curved slightly, though not in fondness. "Yes, back when I thought we were breathing together too." The words hit him harder than he expected. He smirked to mask the sting. "You've gotten sharper with your tongue. I almost like it." She tilted her head, her eyes never leaving his. "You only like things you can control. The moment something doesn't bend to you, you either break it or walk away." He set down the glass with more force than necessary, the crystal clinking against the marble counter. "And yet, here you are, sitting across from me. Don't pretend you don't feel the pull, even now." Her eyes softened for just a second, betraying something he couldn't quite name. Regret, maybe, nostalgia, or perhaps something deeper, something she was hiding. She shifted her gaze to the candles, her voice low and steady. "Feelings don't erase history, and our history is soaked in pain." He moved closer, his footsteps deliberate, his presence filling the room. "History is just that, history. Tonight doesn't have to be about the past. Tonight can be about remembering who we once were, if only for a few hours." She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, the air thickened, charged with unspoken emotions. His hand brushed against hers, tentative yet possessive, and to his surprise, she didn't pull away. Instead, she let it linger, her fingers trembling faintly beneath his touch. "Do you ever wonder," she asked quietly, "if things could have been different? If you had loved me the way I needed you to, not the way you thought was enough?" He froze, his throat tightening. It was the question he avoided for years, the one that haunted him in the silence of empty rooms. He wanted to say yes, to confess that he had replayed every mistake 1,000 times. But his pride strangled the words. Instead, he leaned closer, whispering, "All I know is that I never stopped wanting you." Her eyes glistened, the candlelight catching the shimmer of unshed tears. She let out a shaky breath and rose from the sofa, stepping past him toward the window. Her reflection stood beside his in the glass, two figures side by side, but worlds apart. "You speak of wanting," she said softly, "but wanting isn't the same as loving. You wanted power, you wanted respect, you wanted me to stand by you like another jewel in your crown. But you never gave me what I needed most, your vulnerability." His chest tightened, and for the first time in years, he felt exposed. No woman had ever spoken to him this way, stripped him bare with nothing but words. He wanted to argue, to remind her of the life he had provided, the dreams he had built. But the fire in her voice silenced him. She turned, meeting his gaze once more, and for a heartbeat, the years between them vanished. The tension, the ache, the remnants of love, they all hung in the air like the scent of rain after a storm. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she stepped toward him. He thought it was surrender, thought she was finally giving in to the gravity between them. When she rested her hand lightly against his chest, he closed his eyes, savoring the touch he had missed more than he cared to admit. For a fleeting moment, he felt whole again. But behind her softness was a distance he didn't understand. Something in her touch wasn't about rekindling passion, it was about farewell. And though he didn't yet realize it, the secret she carried was already reshaping everything between them. He opened his eyes, looking down at her, and smiled faintly, convinced he was winning her back. She, however, looked away, her lips pressed together, holding words she wasn't ready to release. The night stretched on, heavy with longing, fragile with truths unspoken. And while he believed he had pulled her closer, she knew the opposite was true. Each heartbeat was leading her further away. The night waned, and with it the fragile spell he thought he had cast over her. The candles had burned low, leaving pools of wax on the polished glass holders, their flames shrinking with every passing minute. The city outside was quieter now, the streets nearly empty, the lights dimming as if the world itself was preparing for dawn. He sat across from her at the small table near the window, a half-finished bottle of wine between them. For a while, they had spoken softly, almost tenderly, about trivial things, old vacations, music they once shared, even the way she used to rearrange his bookshelves just to annoy him. For fleeting moments, it felt like years had melted away. But underneath his laughter, there was an unease. He noticed how she smiled, but never fully. How her eyes darted away when his gaze lingered too long. How every gentle touch she allowed him seemed hesitant, as if there were chains holding her back. Finally, his patience cracked. He set down his glass with a sharp clink and leaned forward, his voice low, intense. "You're hiding something from me." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play games," he said, his tone colder now. "All night, you've been here, but not here. You let me hold you, kiss you, talk to you like before, but your heart isn't in it. You're somewhere else, with someone else." She drew a breath, steadying herself, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. "You always did this," she whispered finally. "You demanded truths when you weren't ready to hear them." His jaw clenched. "Try me." Her hand trembled slightly as she set the glass down. She looked out at the city instead of at him, her reflection in the window a ghost of who she once was. "I didn't come here tonight for you. I didn't agree because of nostalgia or weakness. I came because I needed to end this, for myself. To let you see me one last time before I walk away forever." The words unsettled him, but they weren't enough to satisfy. "That's not it. There's more. I can feel it." He rose to his feet, circling the table like a predator closing in. "Tell me the truth, damn it." Her breath caught, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "You want the truth. Fine." She turned toward him, her face pale yet resolute. "I'm pregnant." The air cracked like a whip. His body went still, his thoughts stumbling over one another in disbelief. He stared at her, his mouth parting, but no sound came out. At first, a spark of hope flared in his chest, an image of their love reborn, a second chance. But then her eyes, shimmering with tears, told him everything. "It's not yours," she said softly, her voice breaking but her gaze steady. The floor seemed to tilt beneath him. His chest tightened as if the air had been sucked from the room. "Not mine." The words felt foreign in his mouth. She shook her head slowly, her hands pressing against her stomach almost protectively. "No." For a moment, he could only stare. Then the fury came, hot and uncontrollable. He slammed his hand down on the table, the wine glasses rattling. "Whose is it?" he demanded, his voice like a growl. Her lips quivered, but she forced the words out. "It doesn't matter whose. What matters is that it's not yours. And that should tell you everything about why we can never go back." His mind spun. Betrayal, humiliation, heartbreak, it all tangled inside him. The thought of her in another man's arms, carrying another man's child, clawed at his insides. You gave yourself to someone else," he said hoarsely, disbelief lacing every syllable. "I gave myself to someone who saw me," she said, her voice rising with sudden strength. "Someone who didn't treat me like property. Someone who listened, who loved me without conditions. Things you never could." Her words were knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. He stumbled back, his hand raking through his hair, his composure unraveling for the first time in years. He, the man who commanded boardrooms, who bent entire industries to his will, now stood broken before a woman he thought he still controlled. "You should have told me," he rasped. "I owed you nothing," she said firmly, tears sliding down her cheeks now. "Not anymore. Tonight was your idea, not mine. But I agreed because I needed you to see the truth, that my life doesn't revolve around you anymore. That I've moved on." The finality in her tone cut deeper than the revelation itself. He felt hollow, stripped bare, the skyscrapers outside mocking him with their cold, unfeeling light. And for the first time in years, the millionaire felt powerless. The dawn crept slowly into the penthouse, washing the room in muted shades of gray and gold. The storm had passed, leaving the city glistening with rain, but inside, the air was heavy, suffocating, thick with the echoes of words that could never be unsaid. He stood near the window, his back rigid, hands braced against the cold glass as if he could steady the chaos within by pressing hard enough against the world outside. His reflection stared back at him. Hollow eyes, clenched jaw, a man who suddenly looked older than his years. Behind him, She gathered her coat from the arm of the sofa, her movements slow but certain, like someone who had already made peace with a decision long ago. She didn't look at him immediately. Instead, she adjusted the collar, smoothed the fabric, anything to delay the moment when their eyes would meet for the last time. He turned, his voice rough, raw from the storm inside him. "You're really leaving?" She paused, finally lifting her gaze to him. Her expression was soft, but there was no hesitation in her eyes. "I already left a long time ago. Tonight just made it final." His chest ached at her calmness. It was easier when she fought him, when her anger matched his. But this serenity, this quiet resolve, it was unbearable. It meant he had lost her completely, not to rage or bitterness, but to the strength she had found in herself. "You could have told me," he said, his words breaking like glass. "You should have told me before, about the child." Her hand rested gently on her stomach, a subtle, protective gesture. "And what would you have done with that truth? Use it to chain me here? To punish me? To drag me into another battle I no longer wanted to fight? No, this child is mine, and it will be raised in love, not in the shadow of your control." He flinched as though struck. The word control burned him, because he knew she was right. All his life, he had wrapped love in chains of ownership, confusing possession for affection. And now, staring at her, he finally understood the cost. He had lost the only person who ever looked at him as more than his fortune, more than his empire. "I never stopped loving you," he said suddenly, his voice trembling with a desperation that surprised even him. "Through all the mistakes, through the fights, through everything, I never stopped." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't move closer. "I believe you, but your love was never the kind I needed. You loved me like a man guards a vault, locked away, untouchable, suffocating. I needed love that set me free." Her words were gentle, yet final. He reached out instinctively, his hand hovering in the air as if he could pull her back with sheer will. But she shook her head, stepping back, the distance between them stretching wider than the marble floor could measure. The elevator bell chimed softly in the distance, announcing its arrival. She walked toward it with steady steps, her heels echoing like a countdown. He followed, but at a slower pace, each movement heavy, as though invisible weights clung to his limbs. At the elevator door, she turned once more. The sight of him, proud shoulders slumped, eyes haunted, lips parted as if to beg her to stay, broke something inside her, but not enough to undo her decision. "Goodbye," she whispered. The doors slid open with a hiss, and she stepped inside. For a brief moment, their eyes locked, his pleading, hers resolute. Then the doors closed, and with them, so did the chapter of their lives together. Silence engulfed him. He stood motionless in the hallway, staring at the cold steel doors that had swallowed her whole. The apartment felt cavernous now, every corner echoing with absence. He returned to the window, sinking into the leather chair beside it, his hands trembling as they covered his face. The city below moved on, cars rushing, people hurrying, the world spinning as if nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. He had money, power, an empire stretching across continents. Yet at this moment, none of it mattered. The skyscrapers he built, the fortune he hoarded, all of it felt meaningless compared to the sound of her heels fading into the distance. For the first time in his life, he wasn't a millionaire, or a conqueror, or a man in control. He was just a man who had lost the one thing he couldn't buy back, her love. And as the first light of morning broke fully across the skyline, he realized the truth he had been running from all night. He hadn't demanded one last night of love. He had begged for a second chance at redemption. And it was gone, forever.